Okay, the project here, you see the partners, and it's coordinated by Institute of Development Studies, and also the partners are University of Brighton in UK and TIAFI, which is an NGO located in Izmir Tepecik area that works closely with refugees and migrants and also low-income Turkish people. And in this research, actually, we are looking at two places, and we try to understand the socio-spatial experiences on housing and well-being. So these are the two crucial topics that we try to understand. And we work on Konak Basmane and also Torbalı. We will talk about whether Torbalı can be addressed as rural or it's peri-urban. But Torbalı is a complex location where we can call it as like a secondary city at some point, but also rural, but also like the center of Torbalı can be considered as urban. But it gives us really very interesting, let me say, very interesting signs of how migration evolves in multiple forms in Izmir, but also Izmir's, let me say, peri-urban Torbalı. So we use different techniques to understand how this experience on housing and well-being evolves. We look at first the GIS mapping of Torbalı between the years 2014 till 2020. And this GIS mapping is, I mean, we use publicly available data. So it's already that, you know, we can download that data from Google Earth, and then we work on that data to see how Torbalı has evolved over time. Additionally, with the key informant interviews, we talk with many stakeholders, ranging from like municipality, like NGOs, like muhtars, and also the people in the field, the Syrians and the Turkish people, employers. This is 34 in-depth interviews we conducted. And also we did 4 focus groups in addition to these key informant interviews to see what is consistent, what is challenging, and we are planning to have 2 more to be conducted in Izmir. And we are going to also conduct a well-being survey among 200 people. This will be done most probably in December. After we got these key informant interviews, we made our analysis through NVivo, and we have 2 coders, but the teams in NVivo are formulated within the project's research theme. And that was a multidisciplinary research, so it was really interesting to see how architects, how urban studies people, and we, international relations and sociology, how they perceive the same data in a different way, and then we determined our notes, and then we make an analysis with 2 researchers, and then our kappa coefficient, which is the intercoder reliability, is 72%. So here I would like to mention 72% is quite enough, but while it remained there is mostly about we have so many notes because we are an interdisciplinary group, and that's actually, I mean, that's a success to have this, I think this consensus. Now I consider Torbalı as rural. Okay, so here I take Torbalı not as a secondary city. Yes, you might say it's what about inner and periphery urban districts? If you look at the definition of UN Habitat, it defines a secondary city as an urban area generally with a population of 100,000 to 500,000. Of course, we have different definitions, but in this presentation and in this study, I'm going to take Torbalı as rural in comparison to actually Izmir, center of Izmir. Current population is close to 200,000 people. And the remarkable thing is the population growth rate is 44%. It's really very high. So Torbalı is evolving and it has a rapid urbanization. It takes a lot of migration from Turkey's different parts of Turkey and also additionally the Syrians. The number of Syrians in Izmir is 150,000. We actually don't know the exact number of Syrians in Torbalı because, as you know, the Migration Authority does not share on district-based population publicly. But this number we received is from our key informant interviews, and we know that it's almost 15,000 people. But in season, like in summer, this number changes, it increases because many seasonal agricultural workers of Syrians from especially border cities of Turkey, they come here, and that the population of Syrians increases on seasonal basis. So we see a huge and rapid industrialization and urbanization ongoing in Torbalı, and this is from we did the literature review with also in architecture, and I learned a lot from Professor Dr. Meltem Gürel, and she talked about plotting urbanism, which means you have the lands that they are not open to construction, no construction permits, but with amnesty laws, these lands, they become eligible. And you are allowed to make constructions. And this photo, I think, reflects it very well, because Torbalı has an enormously well land for agriculture. It's an agricultural place, and the efficiency of the land, the soil is really high. However, Torbalı transforms into an industrial city, and you can easily see here all these farmlands have become new places for new constructions. Some of them are housing, some of them are factories, but in Torbalı you can see that scattered land where you have the agricultural farms, lands, but they have become places to build new houses, because the city is in need of houses, because it receives a lot of migration with population growth. So this becomes like a kind of unplanned transformation ongoing in Torbalı. So it's an attractive destination because you have availability of employment. I've met so many people in Torbalı who were living in Izmir and they were working in Torbalı. And also I met so many people who are living in Torbalı, but they work in Izmir, because it's this metro, the İzban, is now available, public transportation. So it makes it easy to access Torbalı, the proximity also to Izmir, and affordability of housing. I mean, you can the houses are cheap in comparison to, of course, Izmir. So in Torbalı, we have people from nearly all over Turkey. It's a kind of picture, the mosaic of Turkish society. From every city nearly, you have people who have migrated to Torbalı mainly for employment reasons. So there is an interplay ongoing between locals, domestic migrants, and now additionally the Syrians. So they are a kind of in competition, but there is also an harmony, a kind of in competition. They are competing for jobs, for also housing, settlement, and livelihoods. So we observe different type of housing in Torbalı. One of them is like here, with flats, but they are mainly shared by families, by Syrian families. So they rent one apartment flat, but like 2 or 3 families live together. And this is the transformation. Everyone knows it, the muhtar knows it, but this is also accepted a kind of, but in the beginning that was something not well welcomed, but now it's a kind of, the landlords, their perception is as long as they get their high rents, so they allow their flats for those people. So it's a kind of exploitation of people paying rent, by the way. The rents are high, but they give those houses to be shared by many families. And these are the places also where low-income Turkish people also live together. On the other hand, we have these tented settlements. They are everywhere in Torbalı that you can see, like in one part of the street, you come across with those little tents, or there are locations with big tent areas where people, they live their whole year. Okay, so some of them are seasonal, but some of them are located there that this is like their house. They live there throughout the year. And interestingly, also those abandoned dwellings. For example, this type of buildings that the construction has not finished, maybe due to some reasons, maybe because the constructor was out of money, or because there is a legislation, so they stopped it. But all those buildings were occupied by especially by the Syrian community. So they just go there, they just live in this unfinished buildings, and they live there in the last 6 years. So it's not something new. They're living in those areas. It's like their home. They don't, of course, pay rents, but then you can ask how these type of settlements function. For example, in a tent, how you get your electricity, how you get your water, what about the hygiene, what about all those infrastructure, and whether this is informality. Okay, so these were the questions that we try to understand in rural, mostly in rural and also peri-urban Torbalı, because some of those tent areas are in the center, but most of them are on the peri-urban parts of Torbalı. So we use this mapping, one strategy, one method we use is this mapping distribution. And this is developed by two researchers in our project, Sedef Kahan and Mohammed Najar. They talked with like over 40 camps, and they checked whether what we find out on the map is really existing there, and how they function, what is possible in terms of infrastructure, etc. So they confirmed it. Also, we make our field observations, and we look at the map locality and the density and how in time this has changed. And you can see here with different years, we have clusters, clustering with heat map, okay, starting from 2014. Look at this. In 2014, actually, we have nothing in terms of these tent areas. But then it starts to emerge in 2015, which is actually the year, start of this, big migration flow via Turkey to Europe. So it starts to increase and increase and increase. And now we are able to see, especially on the southern part of Torbalı in peri-urban areas, there is an increase of those tented settlements. Additionally, just a minute. Additionally, when we look at the same place in seasonal, like in the same year, but with different months of this agricultural seasonal times, these places also, we started to see tents emerging and then tents disappear. Okay, but in time, they all increase. It's not only, by the way, tented settlements, but here, for example, this is not tented areas, but also additional constructions. Most of them are like people, they build small constructions next to their house, which is like only one room. And some of them like garage type of, or you put your additional stuff there. But those places we observed are started to be rented to the Syrian families. That's not like those families are working with the landlords or the owners, but it is just people are getting income, people are getting rents, okay? So they build these small type of, we don't call them building, it's just next to the house, additional constructions. They don't actually have like, kitchen or things like that. It's just for people to have some shelter, but they live as a family in those places. And we visited, like, it was not in that type at all, but very similar. So they live in those places, but they work mostly in agricultural lands as agricultural workers. So I would like to underline here, I mean, Torbalı always receives agricultural workers, seasonal workers, but since Torbalı becomes more industrialized, now the locals, they prefer to work in factories, such as on Friday. This Friday, we had another focus group. The Turkish people, low-income Turkish people, they say we were working in agricultural lands years before, but now we have factories and we have our social security payments. You know, I can get retired in future, so they prefer to work in the factories rather than the agricultural lands, and that opens a space for Syrians who are in need of for their survival. They work, you know, they work whatever job they find. So they are working on those agricultural lands. So they are actually not taking someone's job, but they are doing the jobs that are not done by the locals. But in addition to this, since Torbalı is big in terms of its agricultural potential and the productivity, we still have domestic migrants coming from southeastern part of Turkey mostly and joining to this Syrian group and working in the field. And they are receiving actually the same wages, actually, the daily. So Syrians are not like, you know, they accept very low costs anymore. That was in the beginning, but now it's the 10th year. But they are working mostly with same prices, wages, let me say. This is another abundant dueling. This is in Beşikçioğlu area. We were really very surprised when we go there with Selin. We did this focus group there. I have to, sorry, here I'm not allowed to share people's photos, so I put blacks on their faces. But this is like those people, they live there in the last 6 years. So they just took this place. It's like flats, you know, they don't pay rent because, you know, those area is not owned by someone. It's just an abandoned building. They just live there as everyone knows each other. But the main problem is it's very isolated, okay? So we also talk with women there. This is an isolated community, but they are connected with other Syrian neighbors, like they are not living there. But what we observe is in Torbalı, Syrians are in close connection with each other, especially over WhatsApp groups. So they are a kind of evolving as, I don't want to call it as a ghetto, but on ethnicity basis, they are connected. But such kind of places are totally isolated from the Turkish community. Therefore, they speak no Turkish. They know no Turkish, and they have lots of children, and those children are not going to school. So they try to find out ad hoc solutions, you know, to teach like Arabic to their children and a kind of support the education of their children. But they are not at schools because this is a totally an isolated community. Even like, you know, there is no public transportation opportunities, and the women are just looking after the children there, but the men were going for daily jobs. We observed it there even while we were talking with them. If someone is just calling, we need someone in the tomato land, could you please come and help us and we'll pay you. And then these were all on daily base jobs, but everyone was a kind of employed. So I don't like making generalizations, but with many people I interviewed, what I observe is Syrians, they are able to find job opportunities in Torbalı. So it's not like a permanent job, but they all receive something and they are able to survive. And those people there were not actually complaining a lot about their lives because they were living previously in rural parts of Syria, and they were got used to live in like this community, live in a low, let me say, low level of conditions that are weak, that are low, and like infrastructure was also not good in their previous life. So they were a kind of satisfied with what they have. And this was, of course, very interesting for us because we were even not able to see, like they don't have kitchens, they don't have bathrooms. But when we asked them, for example, what is your main problem? They said, in Syria, we were able to come together, but here, we can only come together whenever there is a wedding of a Syrian. So like this communal life they miss, but they did not mention a lot about the infrastructure or the housing weaknesses they have. I don't want to call it like they're all satisfied, but they were a kind of, they accepted what they have here, maybe because they don't know what can be the alternative. So they were not claiming anything. And we have actors here. The power relations are so visible in Torbole. Who are these çavuş dayıbaşı? I don't know in English how I can say, but these are like the leading people who brings some people together, and they take them to these farmlands. They make the bargaining on behalf of all people, but they are responsible about your temporary settlement, about to find a job for you. So they take you sometimes with minibuses from one place to another place, and they are the actors. But Syrians also, they have their own dayıbaşı and çavuş, and they are in connection with the Turkish ones. So whenever there is a job opportunity in agricultural lands, they collect people, they take people, men together, and also women, and they work in those lands, and then they take them to different places. But dayıbaşı and çavuş is also responsible about, because you live in this tent area, your electricity, your water usage. So you pay for it as well to those people. For example, in this area, our question was, how do you get electricity? They just said, there is next to us, there is a farm, there is an owner, he allows us to use electricity from their land, but we really don't know how much he pays. He just says us, you have to pay this amount, and we pay. We cannot question. Whenever we question, the landowner cuts the electricity power off and also water, and that makes their life terrible, whenever they have these power cuts. So they are a kind of just, paying it, and they don't know what actually the bill is. So dayıbaşı and çavuş people are also making these arrangements. They bring like water to the land, to the this farm area, or they provide you the possibility of how to have electricity, etc. So çavuş and dayıbaşı are there in Torbole, are the main actors, very important actors, who determines also this mobility and also the conditions and the life conditions of people there. No garbage collection, no education, and the most important thing, as you know, in Turkey, if you want to access services, public services, I mean, if you want to go to a hospital, if you want to send your children to school, if you want to get social assistance and aids, you have to be registered. You have to be registered with Director General of Migration Management, and I think it's changed, its name is changed now, Migration Presidency, something like that, but you have to be registered. And how those people will be registered? Okay, so they say actually they pay for muhtar, and then they can get some fake addresses by some people. They allow them to have fake permanent addresses, but actually they are not existing in those residencies. So this is a kind of informality that we also should not ignore. And they all have a kind of addresses, but in those addresses, these people, they live in different parts of Torbole. Okay, and they are preferred by the employer. This is also from our focus groups, because some of the employers that, I mean, I'm talking about, especially the big landowners, they say, you know, we are inviting locals, but they don't work here. They don't prefer to do the jobs that we offer them, like looking after animals, picking up the products from the farm. So the employers, they say they are hardworking, they work on whatever condition we offer them. Of course, they don't say they work for cheap. Some of them they said, but also in the initial years, like in 2017 and 2018, they were also working for the less wage that you should offer for a Turkish person. Inner center Torbalı, what we also observe, most of them, they work in constructions, but they replace the kind of the domestic migrants from eastern and southern part of Turkey who have come to Torbalı like in 20 years time before. Okay, so now they are employers. They were working on the lands, they were working in the constructions, but now they saved money and they built their own life and they have become employers. So this is replaced, those people are kind of replaced now by Syrians. But those Syrians also who came from like different cities to Torbalı to work, they have their registrations back in those cities. And eventually you are not able to access services here because you have to transfer your registration. And we also observed that people are not very much able to transfer it because in Turkey, transfer of registration eventually is not done like, because I find a job here, so I would like to move it here. There are some conditions that you can, you know, otherwise everyone will say that, you know, they would like to live in Izmir, they would like to live in Istanbul. So there are some criteria, but since those people are not like on, you know, to satisfy those criteria, they don't transfer their registration. And in some period, registration in Izmir is also closed, like they don't get, the authorities don't receive any additional registration. And this causes a problem in terms of accessing to services and also in terms of informality. Therefore, I told you that, you know, we actually don't know of the exact number there. But this creates also another problem about, you know, how we are going to organize, manage the share of the limited sources, the availability of public services. Like the municipality should know, you know, where those people are living and how you are going to provide them services. You cannot ignore the fact that these tent areas in the middle of Torbalı, and you have, you know, you have to collect that garbage, you have to provide public transportation, etc. But here, another main problem here, I think, both locals and Syrians are vulnerable in terms of poverty in Torbalı. So we cannot say that Turkish citizens are a kind of, you know, in social life conditions, socioeconomic conditions, they are not higher than Syrians. And in some of our focus groups, it was even like the Turkish citizens, they were saying that we are in worse conditions, living in worse conditions, but Syrians are able to get social aids, financial aids from international organizations, and that creates a kind of, let me say, I mean, the tolerance of the Turkish people are getting diminished each time, and this creates a kind of increasing social tensions because the vulnerability in Torbalı between Syrians and locals is the degree of vulnerability, they're both vulnerable. And this becomes, I think, this is our observation, a challenge for co-living. I think this is an observation for most of the parts of Turkey. For example, this is a quotation from an NGO interview. The Turkish citizens live under the same special conditions as the Syrians, and when they saw that their neighbors got all the aid and they didn't, a seriously xenophobic attitude started to develop towards Syrians based on financial reasons. Generally speaking, Syrians were more disadvantaged, but the Turkish people were disrupted by, for instance, Syrians receiving free healthcare services. But the employers, they say we need Syrians in our farms, in agricultural sector. If we do not have them, we would have serious difficulty in harvesting the products. No one would do it thanks to Syrians. They are capable of working well in the agriculture. This is a public officer we interviewed in Torbala. But there is also a kind of harmony ongoing. Yeah, of course, we see some individual cases, some criminal cases, some violent cases, they happened, but actually it seems like they are living together without having like big conflicts. And this is from one Muhtar in Torbalı says, I'm not informed about, let me take this here. Okay, any obvious conflict between Syrians and Turkish people living in the tents. We see that Syrians substitute for Turkish workers. This is what I shared a few minutes ago. We cannot deny this situation leads to hidden competition between Turkish and Syrian workers. When pandemic emerged, most of Syrians went to work regardless of the outbreak of COVID. Besides, they were also willing to work more and for lower wage. Some more here I would like to share about the conditions in the tents. Hygiene is the main issue, rain, mud, there is no water channel system, living conditions are horrible, there is no hygiene education, there is a need to improve the awareness. We give them hygiene and soap training, but they don't have a proper place where they can wash their hands and put their soap. They have to use water very carefully in places because they have water tanks and they have limited water. Not being able to wash hands, brushing teeth, no sufficient resources. Now, let me continue with Izmir. This is about Torbalı and now in Izmir. Of course, you know most of the domestic migrants from eastern and southeastern part of Turkey, they were living in Kadife Kale, in Buca Karabağlar, Gediz area, but now also Syrians, you know, they now they came and they rented places there with the worst conditions, but they rent those places and they live also in those parts of Izmir. And Izmir is a migration receiving city, but it's nearly like 4% of Izmir population, because this is the registered number we know, is composed of Syrians. That's actually a lot, you know, in it's like you know, like a little city you have of Syrians. So these vulnerable groups, again, in Izmir, they live together, but here isolation is much more, because in our observation and in our interviews, most of the Syrians, they say, we don't know about our neighbors. We just go and work and come back home. We don't have any time actually for socialization. And they also did not like to be visible at all. You know, for example, one Syrian guy told us, you know, in Syria, I was going and sitting in a cafe, but here, if I sit in a cafe with the Turkish people, they will tell me that, look at this Syrian, he's not working, but he's spending time here in drinking tea and coffee. So they don't also want to be very visible, not a generalization, but from our field work. But they work really hard and they are just spending their time going to work and coming back home. So they don't have time for, you know, socialization with their neighbors. And we see high unemployment also and informality among the Syrians in Izmir, and also lack of competence of municipalities in governance, in migration governance. You know all about this. It's a centralized governance in Turkey. So some of them are still registered in different cities. So they live in Izmir, but they are not registered in our records, but they try to benefit from the public services eventually. And we observe that they frequently change house because of the changing rents and because of changing jobs. Whenever you change your job, you know, they also look for look for places to live close to their jobs. And there is an increasing political polarization ongoing. There was a kind of harmony, but now the social tensions are increasing more because of also in line with the increasing political polarization. However, I should say the market economy functions irrespective of politics. You know, whatever the politics says or tries to give a message, it's all informal employment, or landlords, they are happy with their Syrian tenants because if they pay their rent on time, they don't care about any migration governance issue, etc. Employers are happy as long as they work as cheap labor. But in Kadife Kale area, because you know some of those places, also in Basmane, because they are historical sites, you cannot renew or repair. You cannot even, you know, make small intervention in some of those places. So it makes people to live in those conditions, not only Syrians, but also the Turkish people, without having any possibility of improving the conditions of housing. But you all know about that. It's now a renovation, also urban renovation is ongoing in those places. In our interviews, we observed local community does not identify themselves as discriminating Syrians. Most of the people, they say, we don't discriminate Syrians, it's okay. But then they started to talk about putting like they are noisy, they have crowded families, they don't care about hygienic rules. Such type of, you know, negative connotation follows after they say we are not discriminating people. But interestingly, in our research, people were discriminating Romans rather than Syrians. They were saying that the Roman people are more problematic than Syrians. We don't have any problem with Syrians. They're just going to their work, you know, they try to survive. There is still that a feeling of mercy still exists, even though we observe the social tensions increasing in some parts of Izmir. But people, they say that there is no discrimination. And also Syrians claim that, you know, they don't face or encounter any serious discrimination, but they address low social interaction. So they say we are not discriminated, but also they don't have any social interaction at all with the locals. It's like they say we just greet each other, but they don't share daily life a lot. Okay, this says, I'm not able to read it. Okay. We cannot bring two troubled cultures side by side and expect that friendship and brotherhood will come out of it. One group identified themselves as the actual citizens of Turkey, and somehow we heard about that, and I'm not sure if it is correct either. The other group is sometimes tax exempt. And they receive governmental aid. This is like the perception, okay? When they first come, this is in Torbalı, by the way, I go back to Torbalı. When they first come, the residents, locals of this district, we met and decided to kick them out of this district. The locals said, we don't want Syrians here. However, we were not successful, they remained. Now we all accepted that they will not return. We understood we have to live together, they will not go. So all we accepted this fact. Actually, they don't create any tension or problem, they are silent. I observed no competition with the locals, everyone finds their own way. And we observe, of course, informal employment, not only among Syrians, but also Turkish citizens. As you know, in Turkish economy, it's more than 30% is informal employment. But pandemic also had an impact that they lost because they don't have permanent jobs. There is a loss of income. So you become, again, not able to survive paying your rents, paying your, like buying your food for your children. So again, like all those international organizations, they were talking about integration, resilience building, but now they started to talk again, like in the beginning of the 2015 and 16, how we can provide the basic needs. Okay, so still we observe that there is a need for livelihood support. And when we look at our in vivo analysis also, among these two groups, like we observe the most coded nodes are poverty and cost and rent. So poverty is a really very dominant, let me say, issue that we observe among the people who are living in the same location, because we are not looking at Izmir people, but we are looking at the places that they share housing. Okay. My last slide, I would like to say that you might think that it's over, or like in Torbalı and Izmir, the number of people coming here is like stable. Actually, no, still in Torbalı, we observe that migration continues. And this is happening over social networks of Syrians and also the market needs. As long as the market needs labor, we observed it, like, you know, a Syrian guy, he said, you know, he's organizing everything. He was just texting in WhatsApp and asking, and someone from Urfa is just saying that, yes, I can come and do that job. So he also said, you know, he was living in Subaşı area where most of the Syrians are intensely living. Migration still continues via the social networks of Syrians, and also as long as the market needs them. But they are living as segregated communities. It's much more visible. They say, we don't have Turkish friends. Yes, we work with them, but they don't have a social interaction at all. And there is a collective identity emerging, especially in Torbalı, that they know each other very well. Whenever a case happens, they are all informed. They use this phone applications a lot. They communicate via phone a lot. They are also coming together indoors, like at houses. They are not like in open areas coming together, but there is a solidarity ongoing, and it's a community-based communication, which is really strong among the Syrians in Torbalı. And interestingly, we also observed that they are having short visits to Syria back and forth, and they are still detached to Syria. It's interesting that, you know, I was thinking, you know, only in Bayram times, you know, we allow people to go, but they say, yes, they can ask for travel permits. They go to Syria, they check someone, you know, they have a representative. That person goes to Syria. Sometimes, you know, they check the houses back there. They check whatever those people have, any belongings back there. They also bring some food, etc., you know, from Syria. But when they leave, and when they are in Syria, they have to keep their return papers very carefully, because if, like, the regime forces, they find it, they just they just remove it, they just take it in order to prevent those people's return. But some of them are like, they just accept, they say, we go for voluntary return, because, you know, there is the possibility that you can accept for or ask for, let me say, ask for voluntary return. They ask for voluntary return, and then they come back via the smuggling. So but then they don't have their IDs, they are not registered, because they are, you know, records are like they return, but they come back and they go again and they come back again. So that was a kind of frequent thing, you know, we listened in our interviews, and remarkable, interesting observation. And those competing vulnerabilities, in our opinion, needs to be carefully examined, because this is the reason of the potential social conflict or increasing tensions, as long as we, you know, insist on, yes, Syrian refugees, all refugees are vulnerable, but those vulnerabilities are competing with the socioeconomic and poverty vulnerabilities of the locals. And this creates a challenge, a problem. So we need to be also very careful in resilience building, like those people should be employed. Okay, those people should be helped. We need to provide them food. We need to provide them health services, education. But if you have problems among your locals and the citizens, then this vulnerability becomes actually a challenge for your better integration or future planning. Now I stop here. I think, yeah, the time is okay. I talked a lot, but I try to summarize or findings that we are still working on. We still have some very interesting findings, but we are not able to share them yet. We need to confirm it in our analysis process. So I'm open to your questions now, if you have. Thank you for listening and for your patience.
Thank you very much, Ayselin Hocam, for sharing your ongoing research outputs with us. It seems like there are quite a number of complex and complicated, maybe, dynamics in Torbalı. It seems like there is a clear need and demand for additional labor force in the agricultural sector there, which cannot be met by the domestic labor force. But there are also tensions between different communities. So it was really interesting to hear about your research outputs on these points. I have questions, of course, given that I find this topic, migration in general, fascinating. But I would like to, first of all, open the floor to others. If there are any questions,
yeah, in general, so now. Like migration and Izmir, if you have questions, general questions, I'm also ready to contribute.
Okay.
No questions. Okay.
No, may I jump in and just, if that's okay, if you don't mind, thank you. I'll turn my camera on. I'm Arkan Achar. I'm from Yaşar Üniversitesi, Department of International Relations. Thank you very much, Ayselin Hocam. This is a very interesting topic as well, and I would like to thank you for really just getting involved with the field and hands dirty. So it's a very important thing, and also I really appreciate your approach and methodology, which combines not only social science but just a multidisciplinary approach, which brings in even technology in terms of not only using statistics and coding and programs that comes with it, but also the space that's used through looking into the dwellings of the people, as well as just utilizing the mapping through satellites. I think this is what makes your research is quite distinct and very important from my perspective. I would like to thank you. And also, I'm very fascinated and interested with combination of social, economic, as well as space-related parts of just understanding or raising questions and trying to come up with answers to the various aspects of social life amongst the refugees, immigrants, and just the communities. And you have not really looked away from the local migration and the relations between the people who came from abroad as well, no matter what, like being refugees or long-term immigrants, but also the domestic migration is just I think Torbalı as a point of just coming together of these two aspects. So that's why, from my perspective, this makes your case very important. As you rightly pointed out, the point you've made is migration-related issues are quite complex, and they must be treated rightly so in order to really understand and to come up with certain certain answers to the questions, as well as some guidance even to the people who are involved in migration management from this perspective. I think one of the key points that you have made that I understand, like in most of the cases that the segregated communities, both local and the people who moved in, is an important thing. As if like there are two, just more than one parallel worlds that sometimes like they're converging, predominantly related to the workforce and work-related issues. But other than that, they are quite separated. And unless they are really in need of getting in touch with it, may it be getting services, vital services like health services or education-related issues, that usually the communities are not really getting in touch. I think this is a very important part of what we see. And also, I would like to mention about the local characteristics of a workforce. You mentioned about daybashes. I think like this is a phenomenon which is widespread in Western Turkey, not only exclusive to Torbalı, but rather if you go through the in-depth part of Izmir, even you go to Aydın, just next door city. This is something you could find, and it's not exclusive.
Actually, all over Turkey, in many cities, yeah, in Adana.
Exactly. Of course, like this is kind of a like exploitative labor markets, which are just a couple of people are just exploiting people and their vulnerabilities related to economic conditions. I think you have fascinating brought in a perspective about this, and rightly underlined the social tensions and vulnerabilities and the segregations. And I would like to mention maybe the word grievances maybe most fits into the people's maybe just feelings about each other who are living in the same community right now, though with different legal status, if you will. But I think this what you brought is a very important perspective to us, and I would like to thank you, and also I would like to thank our faculty and the Graduate Institute to just go ahead and have these events for this one. Thank you very much. I do not have a specific question myself, but what I would like to do is just to a little bit wrap up what I get from it. I hope that the rest of the participants also enjoyed, as I enjoyed from your research and what you shared here today. And also I'd like to thank Elif Hocam just doing the moderation part. That's all from my part. Thank you very much, Ayselin Hocam.
Thank you very much, Arikan Hocam. You know, the most challenging part of this project is Meltem Hocam is also here, Professor Dr. Meltem Gürel, the Dean of Faculty of Architecture. And one of our researchers is also here, Aylin. The most challenging part here is to work in an interdisciplinary platform. Like Meltem Hocam, you know, Meltem, she talks about architecture. She makes contributions in architectures, but she asks for the migration policy aspect. I know the migration policy aspect, but I'm lacking behind about this amnesty law, you know, what is possible, what is not possible, the limitations, the legislation in terms of housing. On the other hand, we have one of our researchers is from sociology. She's looking at more to the sociological aspect, providing a sociological aspect. And we were trying to connect all, and also GIS mapping, you know, if we don't have Sadef and Muhammad, we would not be able to use this ArcMap, I think, and that GIS method to look at how these areas have changed over time, those clusters emerging. So that was very challenging, but that was also very inspiring. So I got the point that since migration is a very complicated and a multidisciplinary phenomena, I really learned it in this project. And still it's ongoing. Still, you know, whenever a new case we bring on the agenda, we look at it from different perspectives. And sometimes we are like, okay, how we will proceed now? You know, which theory we are going to base or findings. Now we are working on, for example, the theoretical debates on space making, as you also mentioned, belonging. On the other hand, we look at the urbanization debates, good city, the theoretical debates on it. And of course, we benefit from sociology. So that's really challenging, but that puts things accurately, to handle things accurately. It's more giving us a more reasonable picture to really understand what is going on in the field. And we even understand that the rural and urban are totally different. So thank you that you confirmed, because, you know, we really need this. You know, we are doing something, but we are not sure about if we bring things correctly together. I'm very happy to hear your comment about this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Erkan Hocam, for this summary slash comment. Are there any questions? If there aren't, I'm also ready to
want to ask a question.
Sure, Evrim Hocam.
Okay. I also want to thank you, Ayselin Hoca, for such an interesting presentation. And maybe because I'm studying psychology, I wondered the psychological aspects of this study, that there might be some psychological aspects as well. Ayselin Hocam, you said that there's limited interaction between Syrian migrants with host culture. So I wonder the difference in the acculturation levels of Syrian migrants in urban and rural context. I don't know if you have such a quantitative data, but maybe you have some observations as the researcher who studied in that field. Thank you.
Thank you, Evrim Hocam. We should also have someone from psychology department in our project. You are correct. Evrim Hocam, we are not able to make a generalization. We are not working on any quantitative data, or qualitative approach is also not enough to make big statements. It's not very representative. But from our observation in this project, acculturation levels are low in city than in rural at some point. But in rural, if they live like in those abandoned buildings that are totally isolated from the community, it's also high there. I mean, whenever I say the isolation is high. So if you look at like acculturation models, I'm not very much saying that integration is ongoing, but also no marginalization yet. But it's more a kind of separation, I can say. But we don't have a data that can, you know, support this. I'm currently having another research on, for example, acculturation levels of international students, like in Turkey. I'm doing another study, but there, you know, you bring people together at schools, you bring them together in some common spaces. But with Syrians and Turkish people in Torbalı, they only come together if they work on the same land, agricultural land, or if they work in the same construction. There are projects of international organizations such as IOM, UNHCR, and some NGOs, especially Doç.Dr, you know, they really have a lot of like projects ongoing there, and they care about this social interaction as well, but they are mostly doing things on supporting livelihoods, like providing food, providing hygiene sets, things like that. But also in Izmir and in rural, we have those efforts, also public, like DGMM, I mean Director General of Migration Management, they have a special unit on integration. So they do some projects bringing like people together to increase or to foster a kind of the model of integration. However, with the groups we worked, it was it was not integration, but it was, I think, more separation, I can say, as one of the models. So another psychological aspect is we, the researchers, like we work in the field, and we really had, understood that, Hocam, we need a special training while doing our focus groups and interviews in approaching those vulnerable people. Such as on Friday, while I was doing my interview, the ladies started to cry because they have some traumatic experiences, you know, and as a researcher, you are very much focused on your questions and to get answers for your questions. But I think we, the social scientists, researchers, this is not specific for migration, but whenever you work with such kind of problems, we need to get some training on how to approach people with vulnerabilities, and also how to interpret their sometimes very hidden emotional
reactions.
Yes. Yes. So that's challenging for us. I hope my answer was.
Yes, thank you so much, Ayselin Hocam.
Thank you, Hocam, for putting this acculturation aspect on the also here as a contribution. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I will save mine to the very end. So if there are any other questions, we can receive them.
By the way, Elif Hocam, I would like to put a little point here. Don't limit your understanding as in Torbalı we only have domestic migrants and Syrians. We have Afghans, we have Turkmens, and they are also segregated. Like the Turkmens, they are like, we don't have any Syrian friends. They are in their own community. The Afghans are in their own community. The Afghans are not socially so much like on community-based communication. They don't have a lot, but they are not also socially integrated with the locals or with Syrians. So it's not only Syrians. Syrians are like the visible, or we hear a lot from media, etc. But Afghans, and this is not something new, Afghans were always there. There are also from different nationalities people working in agricultural sector in Torbalı, also in other parts of Turkey.
Thank you very much for this additional note as well. Are there any questions? If not, then maybe I can ask mine. I was kind of curious about the challenges that you experienced during the fieldwork, and you sort of answered that, like, you know, there are certain difficulties, of course, when you're integrating out inputs from vulnerable groups. You highlighted the need to have some kind of previous training, the need to have that type of training. Was there any kind of, you know, space, room for you to, how shall I say, accommodate yourself with working with this type of group? I know that you are an experienced researcher who have been conducting several projects, but were there any particular challenges that you experienced during the fieldwork while conducting interviews, conducting the focus group? And I'm also kind of curious whether you think Torbalı might be a unique case, or do you think it can be compared with other experiences in other parts of the world, maybe, or other cities in Turkey? So yeah, that makes, I think, 2 questions, but there you go.
Thank you very much, Elif Hocam. Really very good 2 questions. Let me start from the last one, whether it's unique. I'm not able to answer it yet because I didn't make any comparative. I don't know in other like cities in such scale and such respect any research. But I remember from the literature review of Meltem Hoca, she was talking about Italy case in Italy and the Roman communities, you know, and there were some similarities in terms of, you know, how they have been accommodated and what kind of challenges occurred there in the Italian case. But it's too early for me to make any comparison because now I'm learning Torbalı, but I have to also read more about the other cases. But for sure, I believe that that's something distinct ongoing there in terms of the interplay between the domestic migrants, locals, and the international ones. The first question, it's really very challenging. It was because of like the COVID also, you know, because we did this field work in COVID time. And when there were some lockdowns also. So we had to do some online in Izmir, but then we decided we can't make it online. We have to be in field for Torbalı. You can ask people living in the tents, you know, just to have online interviews, and you need to observe it. You need to be a part of that case. So we take some risks, and like we were very careful about our measures. But a kind of, we were also, you know, afraid of protecting ourselves physically, like the COVID thing, and psychological things were in the second place, a kind of. So we luckily we didn't get anything, and in those times the vaccination has not yet started, but we were in the field. But after the vaccination, and then we were a little bit relaxed, but still we really don't know. You know, we have to be careful, and we have to protect our researchers and also the interviewees, you know, because we invite them to some places, so we should be very careful. So that was challenging. But the very crucial challenge was when you work with vulnerable groups, you ask them your questions, but they have needs. For example, while I was interviewing, a disabled girl, you know, approached to us, and she said, "You are coming from an authority, you can help us. She's disabled and she doesn't know where to apply, you know, how she can get help." And while you are interviewing, a dayıbaşı approach, like, "What are you doing here? You know, who are you?" So while you're interviewing children, they just surround you and they ask for, like, "Can you bring us this and that?" And they would like to play with you. So with the researchers, you know, the vulnerable people, you look for your research, but they look for help. And they see you as an authority that can help them, that can show them a way to solve their problems. So luckily, you know, I know some things, so I can direct them to some people, to some authorities. And it's not like you do your research, but you also intervene to the field. For example, they ask, "We need permission for this place. We need permission for, like, education things." And you have to warn them, like, you know, "You can't do it in this format. That's not legal." Sometimes they even don't know what is legal, what is not legal. So you need to guide them. That's like you carry on that issue, you know, with your life after the interview ends. You still have connections there. People still call you, and they are not interested with the research, but they are interested with your intervention to improve their life conditions. Another part was the challenging part is sometimes whenever, like this happened with Turkish people, by the way, not with Syrians, the poor Turkish ones, they feel like a lot of stress on them. And when we started to talk about living together, things like that, their economic conditions are so harsh that they don't want to talk about living together. And suddenly they can start to say xenophobic, also, like very discriminative and very aggressive statements. And you need to also calm down, and, you know, you need to also prevent such kind of emerging feelings, because they start their sentences usually like by saying, "Do you want me to be honest? Let me tell you something honest. Do you really want to hear what I really think?" Of course, as a researcher, you really want to hear what they really think, but that sometimes becomes very xenophobic, and that sometimes becomes very aggressive. So that's another challenging thing, that how to first build trust with the interviewee, and how to also draw a kind of the ethical limits that you have there, and how to also at some points, some researchers might prefer, okay, that's done, I go back home, but I'm not that type, you know, I'm usually connected with people. So how to provide a kind of sometimes sustainable assistance to improve the conditions there. These were the things I think that I can share, the trust building and leaving the field clean. I put this in quotation, and I would like to share here one article which is recently published by Derya Göçer and Özgehan Şanyua. They have a wonderful article on how researchers, they approach interviewees and how they do a qualitative study in Turkey with migrants. And this is in quotation, leaving the field clean is really very important, that I also care a lot. It's very challenging, but I think as researchers working in vulnerable groups, we have to be very careful on this, and the ethical aspects and the privacy, Elif Hocam, also, like, for example, I never share their photos. I sometimes see informalities, but I don't create, you know, problems for them. I just warn them, they correct it. But that's also important, that to keep their, to keep your research ethically, also in line with the academic research, like ethics.
Thank you very much for sharing your experiences, Ayselin Hocam. I think fieldwork could be actually the most exciting part of a social science research. And I myself also did some fieldwork also abroad, and I definitely understand what you mean. You know, you are there as a researcher, but it may not be easy to just wear just one hat because of the way people approach you. I mean, in my case, I was sometimes a target of some xenophobic statements, you know, being a foreigner, conducting interviews with people who were involved in different dimensions of policymaking in different European cities. So I can definitely relate to the kind of maybe pressure and dilemma that you might be experiencing every now and then.
Yeah, a little example, even with our translator, you know, like we have a translator with us. He told me that he has been called and he's gonna be interviewed for citizenship in Turkey. And I said, you know, who called you? And he gave me an institution name. And I said, no, but in Turkey, you know, those institutions are not in charge of conducting interviews with citizenships. And he was waiting for 2 years. And then, you know, I told him that this is not the way, and he was a little bit very much surprised and a kind of sad to hear it. But then I said, the right way to put your citizenship application is this and that. And then, you know, I helped him to get an appointment and to follow a different strategy. Even with your translator, you can have, because those people are not actually very competent, or like they don't know, because it's a very complicated system. Even sometimes, no, I can't know, you know, which way to follow for which legislation to which institution. If they have language obstacle, and most of them have, they don't know how to, you know, correctly take their case to the right authority. So you need to guide them at some point. So this becomes like not research, but additional, you are like a single NGO, one person NGO type of thing at some point.
Yeah, well, best of luck in completing this project, and we will look forward to reading the published material based on this research project. Are there any other questions, comments maybe?
Meltem Hocam, would you like to make any comment as being also the senior researcher of this project? Before we close, would you like to add something?
Thank you, Ayselin. I think you covered it very well. I don't really have anything else to add. But I do agree with the challenges, and I think the pandemic was the biggest challenge for us. It would have been better to do more field research earlier on in the project, but the pandemic held us back. And despite that, I appreciate all of the field work that you were able to do, and you know, the feedback from that. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Meltem Hocam. I didn't mention other activities of this project. By the way, we had exhibition in Tiafi. We work with students. They, during Meltem Hoca's course, in cooperation with Umeo University students, they developed some projects for displaced people, some architectural designs. So, but these are additional other parts, other legs of this project. So I didn't mention, but we also had quite remarkable outputs in that respect as well. Okay, thank you.
Maybe I can say something about that architecturally and spatial studies. This project was connected to other projects. We call them live classrooms done in other places. For example, Lesbos, Colombia. So we are connected to other similar situations, refugee situations in other parts of the world, and trying to explore the spatial challenges in terms of accommodating the refugees. So yeah, that's a nice link as well. Thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you.